My name is Daniel Morrison, and until 2:45 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon, I thought 16 years of loyal service meant something at Apex Defense Solutions. That's when our new CEO, Jonathan Pierce, decided to put my salary up on the big screen in front of 17 executives and announced that I was overpaid by 65%. I'm 49 years old, spent 8 years in the Air Force before joining Apex as VP of Business Development here in Dallas. I manage $195 million in annual defense contracts with 52 government clients. My wife, Linda, is a nurse practitioner at Presbyterian Hospital. Our 2 boys are in college. Kevin's a junior at Texas A&M studying engineering, and Steven's a sophomore at UT Austin in their business program. Like most guys my age, I carry the financial load for the family. Between college tuition, our mortgage in Plano, and everything else, we're comfortable but not wealthy. What I wasn't ready for was Jonathan Pierce turning my paycheck into a PowerPoint slide and making it the centerpiece of his first executive leadership meeting. That Thursday morning started normal enough. I grabbed coffee with Paul Martinez, our CFO, before the big meeting. Paul mentioned that Jonathan had been digging deep into departmental budgets and asking pointed questions about individual compensation packages. "Just a heads up, Dan," he said. "The board gave him full authority to cut costs wherever he sees fit." I wasn't worried. My department delivered solid results. 22% annual contract growth, 96% client retention rate, consistently hitting our targets. Sure, my compensation was good, $285,000 total package, but I'd earned every dollar over 16 years of building relationships in the defense sector. My security clearance alone was worth its weight in gold in this industry. The meeting started normal enough. Jonathan had been CEO for 5 weeks, brought in by the board after our previous CEO retired. The board's directive was clear: improve margins, reduce overhead, make the company more competitive in the defense contracting space. Jonathan came from a consulting background, Boston Consulting Group, then a few boutique firms specializing in operational restructuring. He was 44, polished, and had that consultant confidence where everything can be optimized through better data analysis. I was sitting with 16 other executives in the main conference room when Jonathan began his presentation on operational excellence through strategic cost realignment. The slides looked like standard consulting work, benchmarking charts, industry comparisons, cost per revenue ratios. Several departments were flagged for what he called optimization opportunities. Then he got to individual positions. Multiple roles were marked for compensation realignment, corporate speak for pay cuts or elimination. VP of Marketing, 2 director positions, a couple of senior manager roles. Each slide showed current compensation versus what he called industry-aligned benchmarks. Then my position appeared on the screen. "Daniel Morrison, our VP of Business Development," Jonathan said, clicking to a slide that showed my compensation details in full view of everyone. Base salary, bonus structure, benefits package, total annual earnings of $285,000. This represents exactly the kind of cost misalignment we need to address. The room went dead quiet. I felt every set of eyes in that conference room shift from the screen to me, then back to Jonathan. My face got hot, not from embarrassment about my salary. I'd earned every cent of it, but from the humiliation of having my personal compensation displayed publicly like evidence in some kind of trial. $285,000 annually for business development oversight. Jonathan continued, his tone suggesting this was obviously excessive. Industry benchmarking data indicates this role should be compensated in the range of $165,000 to $185,000. Daniel is currently being paid approximately 65% above market rate for his position. Market rate, industry benchmarks. Translation: I found some surveys showing what smaller companies pay people with similar titles, and I've decided those numbers should apply here regardless of actual performance, security clearance requirements, or the revenue those people generate. Paul Martinez, sitting 4 seats down from me, looked uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. "Jonathan, Dan generates significant contract revenue for Apex. His government relationships and clearance level directly contribute to our bottom line. You can really separate." "Paul, with all respect, that's exactly the justification mentality that creates cost bloat." Jonathan interrupted, not even looking at Paul as he spoke. "Every executive in every company believes their role is uniquely valuable and irreplaceable. That's why we need objective market analysis rather than subjective performance narratives. The data clearly shows Daniel is being overcompensated by industry standards." Overcompensated, overpaid. Said publicly in front of the entire executive leadership team with my salary details on a screen as evidence of corporate waste and poor decision-making. I could see some executives taking notes. Others were staring at their laptops, clearly trying to avoid making eye contact with me. A few looked genuinely uncomfortable with what was happening, but nobody was speaking up. These were people I'd worked with for years. Some I'd helped get promoted, others I'd covered for during tough contract negotiations. "Jonathan," I said, keeping my voice steady and professional, "can we discuss this compensation analysis privately? I think there might be some context missing from the benchmarking data. This isn't personal, Daniel, it's purely business analysis. Apex needs to align all compensation with market realities if we're going to improve our operating margins and remain competitive. This is about data, not personalities, right? Data. Like the fact that I held a top-secret security clearance that took 18 months to obtain and cost the company $75,000 in background investigation fees. Like the relationships I'd built with procurement officers at the Pentagon, Defense Logistics Agency, and major prime contractors over 16 years. Like the crisis management I'd handled during government shutdowns, budget sequestrations, and supply chain disruptions that kept our contracts active when competitors got cut. My compensation reflects 16 years of consistently generating contract growth and managing client relationships that represent $155 billion in annual government business. Market benchmarks typically don't account for security clearance requirements, institutional knowledge, and the relationship protection that comes from established government contacts. That's exactly the kind of justification I'm talking about, Jonathan said, turning slightly to address the room rather than me directly. Every expensive employee has a narrative about why their situation is special, why they deserve more than market rate. But when we're paying 65% above benchmark for a business development role, we have a fundamental cost structure problem that requires correction. Several executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. 3 people were definitely taking notes now. I noticed that Helen Foster from HR was writing something down and had that carefully neutral expression that HR people get when they're documenting potentially problematic situations. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked quietly. Jonathan clicked to the next slide, which showed a revised compensation structure for my position. $175,000 base salary, significantly reduced bonus potential, and elimination of several benefits I'd earned through tenure. The slide presented this as a market-aligned compensation structure, a 38% reduction in my total package, displayed on screen for 17 executives to review and discuss. We're proposing compensation that reflects current industry standards for business development oversight roles. This adjustment saves Apex approximately $110,000 annually and brings your compensation in line with comparable positions at similar companies. It's a necessary step toward operational efficiency. $175,000. Jonathan Pierce was proposing to cut my compensation by more than a third and presenting it as rational business analysis rather than what it actually was, a public devaluation of 16 years of proven contract generation. You ever been called overpaid in front of your entire executive team, with your salary displayed on screen as evidence of waste? That's when you realize you're not dealing with business analysis, you're dealing with public humiliation disguised as cost optimization. The worst part wasn't the proposed pay cut. It was the assumption that what I'd built over 16 years was just expensive overhead that could be replaced by someone cheaper. "Jonathan," I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible, "I personally manage relationships with 52 government clients who generate $105 million annually. That's an average of $3.75 million in revenue per client relationship. My total compensation represents about 0.15% of the revenue I directly manage. How exactly is that overpaid? Because market data suggests someone else could manage those relationships for $155,000. Jonathan replied without hesitation. Your personal involvement isn't what generates that revenue, Daniel. Apex's reputation, our security clearances, our competitive pricing. Those generate revenue. Business development oversight is fundamentally a coordination function, not revenue creation. Coordination function. 16 years of strategic account management, crisis response during budget cuts and contract disputes, relationship building at defense industry conferences, weekend calls when clients had procurement emergencies that could delay critical projects. All of it reduced to coordination that anyone making $175,000 could handle. What Jonathan didn't understand was that in defense contracting, you don't just coordinate, you solve problems that can make or break multi-million-dollar contracts. When the Pentagon had that cybersecurity audit crisis that threatened to suspend all contractor access, I spent 3 days straight working with our IT team and government contacts to get our systems certified while competitors got locked out for weeks. When Raytheon was questioning our pricing on the missile guidance contract, I flew to Tucson on my own dime to present directly to their procurement board because I knew the relationship was worth more than the travel expense. Have you discussed this compensation restructuring with any of the government clients I manage? I asked. Client relationships are institutional assets, Daniel. They work with Apex Defense Solutions, not with individual business development executives. Your role is coordinating internal processes to support those institutional relationships. It's important work, but it's not irreplaceable expertise that justifies premium compensation. I looked around the conference room at executives I'd worked with for years. Some were avoiding eye contact entirely. Others looked genuinely uncomfortable but weren't saying anything. Paul Martinez looked like he wanted to object, but was clearly calculating the political cost of challenging the new CEO in his first major presentation. Helen from HR was still taking notes, probably documenting this entire exchange for legal purposes. Smart move considering what was about to happen. Jonathan, I need time to consider this restructuring proposal. You have until Monday morning. Jonathan replied matter-of-factly. The board has already approved these compensation adjustments across multiple positions, and we need to implement them quickly to achieve our Q1 margin improvement targets. Either accept the revised compensation structure, or we'll need to discuss alternative arrangements for your role. Alternative arrangements. Corporate speak for accept the 38% pay cut, or we'll eliminate your position entirely and find someone who will work for $175,000. The meeting continued with similar discussions about other positions, but I stopped listening. I was doing math in my head. Kevin's tuition at Texas A&M was $35,000 per year. Stephen's at UT Austin was $28,000. Our mortgage in Plano was $4,200 monthly. Linda's nursing salary was good, but not enough to cover everything if I took a $110,000 pay cut. But more than the financial calculation, I was processing the fundamental disrespect of what had just happened. Jonathan Pierce had publicly characterized 16 years of proven contract generation as overpaid coordination work. He'd done it in front of 17 people, displaying my personal compensation like evidence in a case for corporate inefficiency. When the meeting finally ended at 4:15 p.m., I walked back to my office feeling like I'd been sucker punched. I closed the door, sat down at my desk, and just stared at the wall for a few minutes. 16 years of client appreciation letters, defense industry awards for contract growth and retention, photos from the annual Defense Contractors Association conference where I'd built half the relationships that kept Apex competitive. Jonathan Pierce had just told me that all of that was worth $75,000 instead of $285,000, and he'd announced it publicly as a demonstration of his aggressive cost management approach. What Jonathan didn't understand, what he couldn't understand with his consulting background, was that in defense contracting, relationships aren't institutional assets that transfer with company letterhead. They're personal trust built through years of solving problems during the moments that actually determine whether a client's project succeeds or fails. When the Pentagon had that procurement crisis 18 months ago that could have delayed the Bradley modernization contract, they didn't call Apex's main number. They called my cell phone at 9 p.m. on a Friday because they knew I'd figure out how to expedite the clearance process through my contacts at Defense Logistics Agency. When Raytheon was considering switching contractors last year because of pricing pressure, they didn't negotiate with our sales department. They called me directly because they trusted my advice about long-term value versus short-term cost savings. I opened my laptop and pulled up my client contact database. 52 government clients representing $105,000 in annual Apex revenue. Most of them had my personal cell phone number. Many had told me over the years that they worked with Apex specifically because they worked with me, not because of our institutional brand or competitive pricing. Then I found the email I'd been thinking about for the last hour. 6 months ago, Charles Williams, CEO of Lone Star Defense Group, Apex's primary competitor, had sent me another recruitment offer. Chuck had been trying to hire me for almost 4 years, and his latest proposal had been compelling. Senior VP of Client Relations, complete operational authority over government accounts, equity participation in the company's growth, and compensation that reflected actual revenue impact rather than market survey benchmarks. I declined that offer 6 months ago out of loyalty to Apex. That loyalty had just been publicly valued at $175,000 instead of $285,000, announced in front of my peers as evidence of poor cost management. At 2:45 p.m., I remember the exact time because I looked at my computer clock before I started typing. I composed what might have been the most important email of my career. Jonathan and executive team, after careful consideration of today's compensation discussion, I am resigning from Apex Defense Solutions effective immediately. I have accepted a senior leadership position with Lone Star Defense Group, where my compensation will reflect the revenue value I generate rather than arbitrary market benchmarks. I wish Apex continued success with your cost optimization initiatives. Best regards, Daniel Morrison. I read it twice, then sent it. No dramatic language, no emotional accusations, just a straightforward business communication announcing my decision. Then I started packing my personal belongings. Awards, photos, the client appreciation letters I'd kept over the years. 16 years of building Apex's defense contracting infrastructure, and it all fit in 2 cardboard boxes. The drive home to Plano gave me time to think about how to tell Linda what had happened. We'd been married 24 years. And she knew me well enough to read my mood the second I walked through the door. "How was your day?" she asked, then immediately saw my face. What happened? I sat down at our kitchen table and told her everything. The public salary display, the 38% pay cut proposal, Jonathan's dismissal of 16 years of relationship building as coordination work, my resignation, and the call to Chuck Williams. Linda listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love about her. She processes information before reacting, thinks through implications before getting emotional. "So you quit without discussing it with me first?" She said finally. "I quit because staying would have meant accepting that what I've built over 16 years is worth 38% less than what we agreed it was worth when they gave me my last raise 14 months ago. And I wasn't going to sit in that office over the weekend calculating whether we could afford to keep the boys in college if I accepted Jonathan's market-aligned compensation structure. What's the offer from Lone Star? Chuck and I will work out details Monday, but 6 months ago he was talking about $315,000 base plus equity participation. If anything, it's probably better now." Linda was quiet for a moment, doing her own math, the boys' tuition, the mortgage, my pride in that order. My pride wasn't the primary factor, but it wasn't irrelevant either. Jonathan Pierce publicly humiliated someone who's generated consistent contract growth for 16 years. He did it as a demonstration of his cost management philosophy. That's not someone I can work for, regardless of the compensation. "I'm proud of you," Linda said. "Not for quitting, for knowing your worth and not accepting less than you deserve. The boys are going to be fine with college. We're going to be fine financially, and Jonathan Pierce is going to learn some expensive lessons about the difference between cost optimization and revenue destruction." That evening, my phone started ringing with calls from Apex clients who'd somehow heard through industry channels that I'd resigned. The defense contracting community in Dallas isn't that large, and news travels fast when a senior executive leaves unexpectedly. The first call was from Colonel Martinez at Defense Logistics Agency, my largest client account representing $38 million in annual contracts with Apex. "Dan, I'm hearing rumors that you left Apex today. What's going on?" "I resigned this afternoon after the new CEO decided my compensation was excessive compared to industry benchmarks. I'm joining Lone Star Defense Group on Monday. Dan, we've worked with you for 14 years. You've saved our procurement operations more times than I can count. When we had that supply chain crisis with the European suppliers, you personally coordinated the alternative sourcing. When we needed emergency parts for the Fort Hood project, you made it happen over a holiday weekend. We don't work with Apex because of their brand or their pricing. We work with Apex because we work with you. Colonel, I appreciate that more than you know. I have a non-compete agreement that prevents me from actively soliciting Apex clients. But if you independently decide you'd prefer to work with me at Lone Star, I'd be honored to continue our relationship there. Consider this my independent decision. Can we schedule a call Tuesday morning to discuss transitioning our contracts to Lone Star? I'll need to talk to our procurement team. But honestly, Dan, you are the relationship. The company name on the contract is just paperwork. By 8:30 p.m. Thursday evening, I'd received similar calls from 7 more major Apex clients, all of them asking variations of the same question: can we follow you to Lone Star? All of them making it clear that their business relationships were with me personally, not with Apex's institutional brand. Jonathan Pierce had called me overpaid to save Apex $110,000 annually. What he was about to discover over the next few weeks was that some cost savings are catastrophically expensive when you don't understand the difference between salary expenses and revenue generation. Friday morning, I played golf with 3 other defense industry executives, 2 clients, 1 prospect who'd been considering Apex for a major project. Word had already spread through the industry grapevine about what had happened at Apex's executive meeting. "So Jonathan Pierce really displayed your salary on screen and called it excessive?" asked Tom from Lockheed Martin, in front of 17 executives as part of his cost optimization presentation. "That's either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant," said Mike from General Dynamics. "Probably both. Anyone in defense contracting knows that client relationships follow the people who build them, not the companies that employ those people." Speaking of which, Tom said, "Lockheed has been evaluating contractors for our new radar project. We were leaning toward Apex, but if you're moving to Lone Star, we should probably talk to them instead." Monday morning at 8 a.m. I was sitting in Chuck Williams' office at Lone Star Defense Group, finalizing my employment contract as Senior VP of Client Relations. Chuck had been true to his word. The offer was even better than what he'd proposed 6 months earlier. $325,000 base salary, 12% equity participation that vested over 4 years, complete operational authority over government accounts, and a signing bonus that more than covered the transition costs. While we were reviewing contract details, my personal phone started buzzing with forwarded emails from former Apex colleagues. Defense Logistics Agency had formally terminated their supply contracts with Apex effective in 45 days, citing changes in account management relationships and strategic partnership requirements. By 10 a.m., I had confirmation that 6 more major government clients had issued contract termination notices to Apex. All of them referenced account management continuity concerns and relationship-based partnership requirements, industry language, that essentially meant we're following Daniel Morrison to wherever he goes. At 1:15 p.m., exactly 72 hours after Jonathan called me overpaid, my personal phone rang. "Jonathan Pierce, Daniel, we need to discuss what's happening. 7 major clients have terminated contracts this morning, and 4 more have indicated they're reviewing their supplier relationships. All of them specifically mentioned your departure in their termination communications. Jonathan, I'm no longer employed by Apex. Client relationship management is your responsibility now, managed by whoever you hire at the market-aligned $75,000 salary you mentioned Thursday. These contract terminations are directly related to your resignation. This looks like coordinated client solicitation, which would violate your non-compete agreement. I haven't contacted a single Apex client, Jonathan. My non-compete agreement explicitly prohibits solicitation, and I've followed it precisely. If clients are choosing to terminate their Apex contracts, that's their independent business decision based on their evaluation of whether they trust Apex's account management without the person they've worked with for years. 7 major clients in one morning isn't coincidence. It's orchestrated. 7 clients in one morning is what happens when you call someone overpaid in front of the executive team, propose a 38% compensation cut, and then discover those clients actually worked with that person rather than with your institutional brand. You restructured my position without considering whether clients agreed with your assessment that my role was replaceable coordination work. The desperation in Jonathan's voice was becoming more apparent with each call. This wasn't the confident consultant who displayed my salary on screen 3 days earlier. This was someone watching his cost optimization strategy destroy the very revenue he was trying to protect. The complete exodus of Apex's client portfolio took exactly 3 weeks. I watched it unfold from my new office at Lone Star Defense Group, monitoring industry news and receiving daily updates from former Apex colleagues who were living through Jonathan Pierce's catastrophic miscalculation. By the end of week 1, Apex had lost 13 major clients representing $89 million in annual revenue. By week 2, 21 clients totaling $142 million. By week 3, 28 clients representing $167 million, nearly 85% of the portfolio I'd managed for 16 years. Jonathan attempted to stop the hemorrhaging through emergency client retention calls, offering extended payment terms, volume discounts, and dedicated account manager assignments. But what he couldn't offer was what clients actually valued: personal relationships with someone who understood their procurement requirements through years of solving problems during operational crises. The defense industry is built on trust and proven performance. When Colonel Martinez needed emergency sourcing during a supply chain breakdown, he didn't call a customer service number. He called my personal cell at 6 a.m. on a Saturday because he knew I'd make it happen. When Raytheon faced a contract dispute that could have delayed their entire production schedule, they called me directly because they trusted my judgment about how to navigate Pentagon bureaucracy. Those relationships weren't transferable corporate assets. They were personal bonds built through years of delivering results when it mattered most. The industry noticed immediately. By week 2, Defense Industry Today published an article titled "Apex Defense Faces Major Client Retention Crisis Following Executive Departure." The article specifically noted that the rapid client exodus following Morrison's departure raises fundamental questions about whether Apex's revenue was driven by institutional reputation or personal relationships, a distinction with significant implications for defense contractors and their talent retention strategies. Translation: everyone in defense contracting understood exactly what was happening. Jonathan Pierce had made the catastrophic mistake of believing client revenue was institutional rather than dependent on the relationships that generated that revenue. At 3:45 p.m. on week 3, Jonathan called again. This time, his voice carried none of the confident cost management philosophy he displayed in that executive meeting. "Daniel, we need to stop this. We've lost over $167 million in client contracts in 3 weeks. The board is demanding explanations, and our Q2 projections are completely destroyed. Jonathan, I'm no longer part of Apex. I have my own responsibilities now at Lone Star with clients who've independently chosen to work with me. We're prepared to offer complete restoration of your position, full salary restoration to $285,000, plus a 35% increase, equity participation, signing bonus, and complete operational authority over all client relationships. Whatever it takes, full restoration plus 35% increase." 3 weeks after calling me overpaid and proposing a 38% cut, Jonathan was offering me $385,000 to come back and try to salvage the client relationships he'd destroyed through his public humiliation strategy. "Jonathan, I've accepted formal engagement proposals from 34 former Apex clients, representing $17.8 in each Lons dollars in annual contracts. Lone Star is fully operational with revenue commitments that exceed what I managed at Apex. Why would I return to a company where the CEO publicly characterized me as overpaid coordination work? Because you built those relationships over 16 years at Apex. 16 years that you valued at $145,000 as replaceable overhead. 3 weeks ago, you displayed my salary as evidence of excessive costs. Today, you're offering 35% more than I earned because you've discovered that clients weren't working with Apex. They were working with me. What's changed isn't my value, Jonathan. What's changed is your understanding of what generates revenue." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for almost 30 seconds. When Jonathan finally spoke, his voice had lost all its consulting authority. "Dan, I made a mistake. I didn't understand the nature of your client relationships. The board is furious. If we can't stop this client exodus, they're going to remove me. I need you to come back. Jonathan, I respect that you're acknowledging the mistake, but the damage is done. You didn't just undervalue my compensation, you publicly humiliated me in front of 17 executives as a demonstration of your cost-cutting philosophy. Those clients didn't leave because of money. They left because they lost confidence in Apex's judgment when you characterized their trusted partner as overpaid overhead. The financial impact was devastating. Apex's revenue dropped 28% in a single quarter. Unable to maintain operational costs without the client base, they laid off 84 employees across sales, operations, and support functions. The company that had restructured my position to save a $110,000 annually was now eliminating dozens of jobs to survive the revenue crisis my departure had triggered. By month 2, Jonathan Pierce was removed as CEO by the board, citing strategic misjudgment regarding client relationship architecture and executive talent management. He took a position at a regional defense subcontractor, a significant step down from leading a major prime contractor. By month 4, Apex Defense Solutions was acquired by a larger defense conglomerate at approximately 52% of their valuation from 8 months earlier. The acquisition announcement specifically mentioned client retention challenges and revenue stabilization requirements as factors affecting the purchase price. Meanwhile, Lone Star Defense Group was experiencing unprecedented growth. In my first quarter as Senior VP of Client Relations, I'd successfully established contracts with 39 former Apex clients who had independently chosen to work with me, plus 6 new clients who approached Lone Star based on industry reputation. Combined annual revenue, $180 million, exceeding what I'd generated at Apex. 12 months later, Harvard Business Review published a case study titled The $110,000 Cost Savings That Destroyed $125 million in Revenue. When market benchmarks replace value analysis, the article became required reading in business school programs, used specifically to illustrate the critical distinction between salary costs and revenue generation value in relationship-driven industries. The case study quoted one of my former clients. We didn't work with Apex Defense Solutions because of their competitive pricing or institutional reputation. We worked with Apex because we worked with Dan Morrison. When they decided his expertise was overpriced, they decided our partnership was dispensable. We disagreed. I kept one memento from my Apex years, a screenshot of Jonathan's PowerPoint slide showing my salary displayed as evidence of excessive costs. It's framed in my office at Lone Star, next to the Defense Industry Leadership Award I received 10 months after joining the company. Kevin graduated from Texas A&M last spring with his engineering degree and landed a job with Boeing. Steven's graduating from UT Austin this December with his business degree. Linda still works at Presbyterian Hospital, though she cut back to part-time after my equity participation at Lone Star started generating significant returns. Sometimes the most expensive business education comes from learning that client relationships aren't administrative overhead. They're personal trust built over years of solving problems during moments that determine business success or failure. I got called overpaid at a meeting, so I walked out, and their revenue dropped 28%, not through solicitation, but through clients independently choosing to follow expertise they'd trusted for 16 years. That's not revenge. That's the market teaching Jonathan Pierce. What I apparently couldn't hear are 2 powerful closing insight sentences as bullet points. Sometimes the most valuable employees aren't the ones who cost the least. They're the ones whose departure costs the most. When you publicly call someone overpaid, you're not just questioning their salary, you're questioning every client's judgment about who they choose to trust with their business.